This is the High Desert Luthiery podcast with singer-songwriter Serene Amor.
Me even singing and songwriting in the first place was just kind of like an accident. I didn't really think I could necessarily do it. It just happened. Somebody reached out to me, asked me if I was interested in recording, and I went over there and they were like, well, you're going to either prove to me that you can write or not. And I was like, well, I don't know if I can write. And they were like, well, give it a shot. And, and I wrote something and they were like, hey, that's actually pretty good. And then I just kind of kept working on it, and I just kind of got addicted to that process.
Go ahead and run away from them. I left and you stayed. Didn't have to be that way, but the truth is consequence of the lies. There's nothing from me that you can hide.
Joining me on today's show is local Albuquerque R&B singer-songwriter Serene Amor. We both share a strong interest in R&B and a love for the music of Sade. She talks about her newest EP that'll be coming out February 22nd, titled The Feeling. She talks about the songwriting process and the feeling behind the feeling. I hope you enjoy this podcast, and I hope you enjoy this episode. Welcome to the High Desert Luthiery podcast. I'm Perry from Unga Guitars and the creator of the High Desert Luthiery Invitational, or HDLI for short. The HDLI is a small trade show that will happen twice a year, June and December. It's a collaboration of luthiers, luthier-adjacent creators, musicians, and the art that comes from putting all these people together. The HDLI supports the music community by providing free booths to the vendors and free admission to the public. All of the participating vendors and musicians are curated by me to create a cohesive, organized event. The HDLI encourages community and collaboration amongst the artists. This podcast is one way to help us all get to know one another. To learn more about the show and the artists, please visit our website, highdesertluthery.com. To hear more episodes of the podcast, please visit our YouTube channel, High Desert Luthiery Podcast. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Serene Amor. I am a R&B soul artist.
All right. Well, thank you for joining me today. To me, in my experience with local music, you are one of the only ones that has a sort of a stage name or nom de plume or, whatever you want to call it. What was the inspiration for your artist name?
Okay, so my real name is Serena, and the Latin root of that name is Serene. So I used to have this like little name poster thing on the wall as a kid, so I always look at that. So while I sing about love, I was like Serene Amor. And then I was like, okay, like calm love. And, I feel like my music is really like soft and very like calming, kind of Sade-ish vibes. I wouldn't say I sound like Sade or anything like that, but just very jazzy and neo soul. So I was like, well, that kind of makes sense. Like calm love, that's kind of what represents my music. And what's interesting is my last name is Zamora. So it's really just essentially my name because it's like Serene Amor. Literally just a Z and an A shy of like my actual name. So the more that I kind of thought about it, just the more I kind of like fit. So we just kind of ran with it.
That's cool. And when you're performing, like, would you say you take on a different persona? I feel like in real life, I keep to myself. I kind of mind my own business and I don't really go out of my way to interact with people. I find myself like now more introverted than I used to be. And so like interacting with people, if I'm just out and about running errands or something, I'm on a mission, so I won't necessarily stop. At work, it's a lot different. I'm engaging because that's my job. And so like when I get on stage, all of a sudden I become engaging. All of a sudden I have the words. When in these interviews, I'm stalling out and I'm stuck on what is next. Like, so, with that said, would you say you take on a different sort of persona on stage?
I feel like when I'm on stage, like I feel like I'm like the truest like form of myself. But I think that in essence is kind of like a persona, because I can't just walk out and be that all the time, right? Because when you're on stage, you're like vulnerable and you're really like connecting with people, I feel like, or at least that's the goal. It's like kind of like a superpower, but you can't like walk around like using those superpowers all the time. It's just like you protect that. But definitely, because I feel like when I'm on stage, I'm like really vulnerable, and in that nature, I'm very like extroverted. But I also feel that I'm very introverted and I need like a lot of time to myself, and I can be like kind of like a secluded type of person. And I think it's just like the recharging of energy, you know, especially when you're dealing with like a lot of people and doing that all the time. So I don't think people see that side of me either. And that's a piece that like is different as well, you know?
Oh, yeah.
I feel like I almost went away from the question on that one. I'm so sorry.
I think you nailed it. It's kind of a two-parter, and you really nailed it, and a few other things. And the whole reason why I put this podcast together was to introduce everyone who's a part of the show as a person. So very often with a guitar show where you sign up to be a vendor or you're asked to perform, you pay your fee to be a part of the whole event. And then you show up and you don't really know who's in charge. Where do I report in? Like all of this stuff. Where do I park? Like, simple stuff like that. And it's all unknowns until you find out where you need to go and you get there to do your job for the day. So, in thinking about that, we just did a smaller show in December and no one knew me. So, when they all walked in, I was setting up. My girlfriend and I were in there setting everything up, and because we had our own booth along with setting up the whole event, and no one really knew who to ask for or who to look for. And we just had to, like, kind of get them as they were coming in and take them where they need to go. And there's very little time for any introduction or anything like that. And then at an event, you're busy the whole time. So you don't really get to stop and go get to know your neighbor or something like that. And so, I put the podcast together to be able to have that opportunity and, give people an idea of who all of the artists involved with the show are, as, what do they look like? Where can I find them? Social media, do they have websites, do they have music somewhere?
Yeah.
And, just put a name with a face. And then you're even more excited, or at least I am. I'm more excited to get to the show and see you when you walk in and know that, yeah, this is really happening now. So I really appreciate you sharing, that part of you and the vulnerability. That's really interesting. I never looked at it like that, but it's true. I feel like when you're in the zone, like our musicians talk, we're in the pocket right now. It doesn't necessarily come down to just playing. It's like more than that. It's relating to the people, to the players around you. Now you're speaking a different language, but even if you're only opening up to them, you are vulnerable. And I feel like that's a really good point to bring up. And that's something you can't teach. You just have to be willing to go there.
You have to, yeah. It's vulnerability and connection, but you can't have connection without vulnerability, right? So you have to have somebody, even your bandmates. Yeah, that's why it's like certain people can't work with each other. If you don't vibe, you don't vibe. And it's okay. It doesn't mean that you're good or bad. It just doesn't work. But having that vulnerability, I feel like is important. And even if you're a singular person on stage, you got to be vulnerable with like your audience. And vulnerability doesn't mean just like sadness and being like that. Even it's your vulnerability to be wild and crazy. Like, you could think about it in contrast of like a Nina Simone or like Etta James. And like even like an Ozzy Osbourne, like, because he just didn't care what people thought. He was 1,000% vulnerable, but you don't see vulnerability necessarily like that either. Allowed you to see who he really was without fear. And the same for Etta James, which she, professed all of her pain and everything she went through and really showed you the real raw feelings of herself, and very powerful both ways,
Yeah, speaking on Etta James, did you ever see that movie Cadillac Records?
I did, yeah.
I love that movie. I've never really been a Beyonce fan, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
still not a fan, but what she did with those Etta James songs, like her covers of those songs, were stellar.
Oh, incredible.
Yeah, that movie was really cool. You never really know how accurate any of those sort of documentary or moment in time movies are, but I really liked that movie, and that there was many musicians I was aware of, and sort of the behind the scenes and their lives, and in a really well delivered package for anybody who has not seen Cadillac Records and appreciates the music of Etta James. Very good movie. I can't recommend it enough.
Mm-hmm.
How long have you been making music? However you want to describe that.
I just always remember as a little girl, like loving to sing. My mom, she sang, so she was like obsessed with like Whitney Houston and Aretha Franklin. So I've always had a love for it. And then I picked up guitar at 15. I remember I got a job, my first job. And then I remember like my first paycheck, I was just like, I just want to get a guitar, because I ended up ditching class a lot in high school. And I'd go hang out with like the guitar kids. And I would sing, and then I just wanted to learn how to play. So I went and got a guitar, and it's been like that ever since,
Hmm.
essentially, on and off. And then I became a mother somewhat young. I stopped playing for a little while. But it never left me. And then I just think, yeah, like a couple years ago, somebody asked me to try out for a band. I was like, sure. It was like a funk band. And then I ended up doing that. That's kind of when it got more serious. I just kind of did it because I enjoyed it. And I was kind of just like a closet musician for a really long time. I never joined a band. I never really did anything with it. And I guess I just didn't ever think that I could or whatever. And, I was dabbling in writing my own music, but I was real busy in that band. And then I was going to school, working, being a mom. And then I just decided like the band stuff wasn't as fun for me anymore. It just felt like more of a job because I'm doing covers. I just couldn't stand the repetition anymore. And I was like, I just want to create. So I just kind of took off into my own songwriting thing and got a good response. So I've just been trying to really work on that for the past like 6 months now.
When I do play here at home, I enjoy interpreting other songs, covering other songs, figuring out like what I could do with them to make them my own. And like Allison and I will rearrange songs now and then to like maybe swap out parts that don't make sense or that I don't connect with, and sort of turn any song into more of a ride, or just change the chord structure on a song. And this usually comes from me listening to a song, realizing it sounds like another song, and knowing that other song, and then saying, oh, these are in the same key, same changes. Let's see if we can melt them together or something like that. Any music done well is wonderful, but it's definitely easy to see when people are punching the clock or just going through the motions, and I think that's very brave of you to say this isn't for me. And it's also really a great thing that you noticed that in yourself and you took action. So can you talk about what you've been doing now with recording?
So I've been recording an EP, putting in the finishing touches right now. But everything's recorded, laid down. Background vocals are done. So now it's just really just like mixing. So I have an appointment tomorrow for mixing. And yeah, essentially the album's done and it'll be out February 22nd. And it'll be a 6-song EP. It's like a love story. It's built to tell you a story. So it's really just an introduction of like love, feeling flirty, and then into this song where it's like you're looking at your significant other like in kind of like this cocky aspect of like, oh, you're really falling for me, to really like falling. And then the next song goes into like this part where you like feel really connected with this individual, and you realize like the interconnection, or when you feel like you're the only person in the room with this person. And then it goes into this like deep falling in love where you're like, okay, I'm sure that this person is for me. And that's like the 4th song. And then unfortunately it goes like a little south, because then there's this song that I wrote. It's called Used to Love Me, which is really just like a breakup song, is when you realize, like, at the peak of that love, and then like losing that love, and like just thinking about how that used to feel, or when somebody that you loved like used to look at you a certain way, and how that feeling like made you feel. And then, like, compared to now, it's like you never thought you were gonna ever lose that feeling, and then you did. And then the last song of the EP is called It's Over. And it's just essentially sealing everything and being okay with everything being complete, and just understanding that, like, love doesn't, just because you love somebody, it doesn't mean that it has to last forever, and that's okay. Like, you can love and move on, and everything's gonna be okay. And they were kind of written at different times, but for the same person. So it's a very real life kind of story. So
With that last song, did you choose to take the approach of like this is a celebration of life, or like, because I've experienced these sort of songs in a few different ways. So that's one way where it's like sort of upbeat and it's like, yeah, I got my freedom, that sort of thing. And then another version might be where you go for a ride, where you go from upset to, maybe even from a minor key into a major key by the end. What was your approach to that song?
it's just a very powerful kind of ballad. It has some sadness to it. There's some lyrics, like, so I could just tell you this chorus is like, where did we go wrong? I never felt so far away from you. We didn't make it far. Like, I know this is our destiny, but I can't breathe, like hardly sleep. So it's just like that fight. It's just like knowing that this is like the best decision, and you have your moments of this, but then it's just like you kind of realize the hurt, and then you're kind of like, yeah, like, I don't deserve this. So it's really, there's a little bit of back and forth between like the sadness and then like this power, but it kind of ends on that powerful note of where it's just like, I know my worth, and I'm okay with what happened, and like the hurt you kind of caused me, and I'm like ready to move on.
Okay.
So
I very rarely get to talk to artists, musicians, songwriters, about a song. And so getting to ask the question and learn about what a song is about, it really helps the understanding. And one example of that, there's this Eric Benet album. I don't know if you've heard of him.
I
Uh,
love Eric Benet.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of falsetto singers and like singers in that really high tenor range. I like to think that I can sing in that range, but as I get older, I'm learning that not anymore, unless I really start working my vocals out. And I haven't been staying on track with that. But he has a song called Sometimes I Cry, and it's like this epic ballad, and it feels like a breakup song. And I can't find this documentary anywhere. It was around when the album came out, but I don't know where I saw it. And it's a documentary about the making of the album, and that song specifically is about his wife who had passed away, and this was like the first song that he wrote for her, and it's his story about feeling the loss and then kind of coming out of that and finding a new relationship, and basically writing a letter to his dead wife, asking for like her kind of permission and her like approval. And I remember hearing that and I was just in tears. And every time I hear the song now, I can barely stand to hear the song. I feel like he does such a great job emoting. You kind of feel every bit. And on that album, he does a lot of duets.
Yeah.
And he has some really, really upbeat banger duets. And I think Faith Evans is on one of them. And
Oh, yeah.
they have this tremendous back and forth, and I think like that album is what really got me into Eric Benet and his ability to emote in at least that album. And I was just like, wow. And then getting to see like the behind the scenes and what everybody was going through making it and all the excitement. And, having that backstory makes it much, much more.
Yeah.
I appreciate you sharing that. So the album's coming out February
22nd. It's called The Feeling.
Did you go into this knowing you were going to call your album that, or did you figure that out later?
I figured that out later. Anything that has to kind of do with like my music is really it just kind of has to happen. When I was like making these songs, I felt myself like repeating that word, right? I try to describe this feeling, this feeling, this feeling, And then that was like kind of what repeated in my head so much. And I was like, well, I mean, it makes sense to be that because that was me just essentially what I was trying to describe the whole album was that feeling, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So it just kind of came to be and it felt right. So I just went with it, And I do this all the time. I'm like trying to perfect it because like sometimes I'll have a whole song written and then there's just like one phrase I don't like. I'll sit there for hours and then I'll lose concentration of the feeling of the song because I'm so hyper focused on like correcting it. So I've tried to learn how to just let go of that and try to trust my instinct as much as possible when it comes to those types of things, and not to think too much about it. Like that, I think it feels right, and then just wing it,
Yeah, what was the recording process like? Did you have other musicians you were working with to get, everything in your head out, or was it just you?
This is just me. This album is gonna actually be all like backing tracks, but I didn't hire musicians to do that instrumentation for me. So these are beats that I've like purchased. So the next phase of what I would like to do is like I like to do everything live instruments, right? I have a few songs that I have written like acoustically. I have a couple of songs I've written like with some of my friends that we have live instruments. So like my first album, which is gonna be what I'm working on next. Within like the next month, I'm gonna start working on that. All of that's gonna be, I think, live instruments and everything. Me even singing and songwriting in the first place was just kind of like an accident. I didn't really think I could necessarily do it. It just happened. Somebody reached out to me, asked me if I was interested in recording, and I went over there and they were like, well, you're going to either prove to me that you can write or not. And I was like, well, I don't know if I can write. And they were like, well, give it a shot. And, and I wrote something and they were like, hey, that's actually pretty good. And then I just kind of kept working on it and I just kind of got addicted to that process. But it all just kind of happened. Wasn't really expecting anything to happen. So it's like this snowball effect. So I'm like, yeah, these are tracks and I feel like they're really good songs and I'm really proud of them. But now I'm ready for that next step of like, yeah, because I love instruments. I love live bands. I love live music. That's what makes me feel the most alive. So try to figure that out, hopefully, and be successful at it. So cool.
Yeah. What instruments do you play?
I just play guitar.
Oh, okay. You're going to be playing at the next High Desert Luthiery Invitational, or HDLI as we're calling it now, on June 2nd.
Yes.
So this is like a stringed instrument driven event. I'm hoping you'll be playing your guitar or have somebody accompanying you. Have you thought about, what your approach might be for that?
Oh, absolutely. Everything's going to be live instruments. So I'll definitely be playing guitar, want a good keyboard player, bass player, drums. So yeah, like a 4-person set for sure. Want to bring the R&B kind of soul jazzy flavor to the stage and hopefully like create a really good atmosphere for that.
Wonderful. I'm looking forward to seeing you at the event, and I'm looking forward to hearing some great R&B. I can't get enough of it. I talk to so many different musicians and guitar makers, and I'm often working for different types of musicians, playing all sorts of different music, and it's always like a big surprise, hey, what kind of music do you play? And I'm like, I'm primarily an R&B blues guy when it comes to playing. I think that's where I've really found my comfort zone or what I enjoy the most. And having played in few different bands, just sat in. I realized right away, like, yeah, I'm at my best when I'm enjoying myself when I'm playing blues and R&B, and I just haven't come across a whole lot here in Albuquerque, but I also don't really go out at all. And I just, I figure, well, I can get all the listening in I want to in my headphones, and I can take those wherever I go. I'm really going to enjoy having an R&B singer and group, as part of the event. And I really appreciate you being open to being a part of the event, and remind us when your album comes out so we can plug you. I look forward to listening to it, hearing the story. I love story, and I'm usually drawn to a song through the chords. I love chords. And then I'll pick up on the lyrics later, especially when it's a story. I'm just like, oh, wow, now I'm going on a ride. Like, this is great. And, just listening over and over and over and getting to know it better. Albums are like friends to me. I'll just listen to them over and over and over again. Sometimes it's just songs, but it's such an amazing experience just to sit down and be with an album, and especially when it takes you on an adventure, tells you a story. So I'm very much looking forward to this. You mentioned Sade earlier. If you get to see her perform, and I've never seen her just on video, she has a very strong stage presence. It's a really interesting thing. Like, the band is just as important as she is. And I think she knows this, and it's why the band has remained the same all these decades later. She's such a unique performer. She doesn't rely on like shaking her ass or like wearing a minimum amount of clothes. Like, she is literally just her as she is, and it really doesn't come off like she's trying to do anything else. So like in that sense, she's this very real performer, that brings it to me. How would you say she inspires you?
Oh my gosh, there's so many ways that she inspires me. When I look at her, I just feel like she is the ultimate form of femininity, right? Just because, her songs are very vulnerable. She's very connected when she sings. She's connected with, her band. I think you said it perfectly. Like, she respects the band. There can be like a lot of ego involved with like leaders of bands, but when you understand, like, you kind of all need each other and there's just this mutual respect and nobody's like above each other, it really becomes transformative. But ideally the singer is going to be the forefront to that, but the way she handles the stage is, I think she is just 1,000% herself and in her element. And I'm sure she's had off days, but when I watch her, I just kind of see her as her purest self. And she knows who she is. So she doesn't try to do anything other than who she is, and it works. And she's as in tune with the music around her as she is with the words that she speaks. And like, she's kind of like a conductor to how she kind of commands her stage. And kind of going back to kind of what I was saying, is that vulnerability and having that interconnection with your bandmates or people around you. I think she's just capable of doing all of those things. So a lot of the times, it's when I go on the stage or when I sing certain things, it's like, depending on what song I'm singing, even when I used to sing covers, like, I would think of a person like that I feel like engulfs the song, and it doesn't even necessarily have to be the person that sings the song. And I would just kind of think about them and like what they would do, and it helps me channel that energy a little bit. I would like to think that it does, I guess I should say. But Sade, in my music, I want to have that impact. Like, I don't want to be up there like shaking my ass for attention. Like, I want to be respected for my art or my musicality or my band's musicality. I love music. It's like my passion. And it's always been my passion, and I respect it a lot. And it's not about, how good I look or like how good I sound. Like, I want it to mean something to somebody. I want you to feel something. If I can get you to feel something, then I'm doing my job right, or that's what I want to be successful at.
I think that's a really good spot to end here. Thank you for taking the time to join me today. I really appreciate it. And like I said before, if you have anything come up and you have a gig or something, let us know when you release your album. Let us know, and we will do our best to spread the word about what you're doing. And I really look forward to hearing this album. You have a wonderful rest of your day.
All right. Thank you so much. Appreciate you. Yep.
Serene Amor. It was great getting to know her and talk about her songwriting process. And I'm really excited to hear her album, The Feeling, which will be out February 22nd. She'll also be performing on the main stage at the upcoming High Desert Luthiery Invitational on June 2nd here in Albuquerque at Rio Bravo Brewing. Oh man, that one throws me for a loop sometimes. Once again, I'm your host, Perry from Unga Guitars. You can learn more about the show at our website, highdesertluthery.com. You can listen to more episodes of the podcast on our YouTube channel, High Desert Luthery Podcast. And I look forward to seeing you in the next one.